in your life, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter where you started. We can all have better brain health.
There's so many misconceptions about brain health.
And so I often tell people, in fact, that you can add this to your resume today. You are a neuroengineer. Every one of us.
Wow.
We're engineering our own brain, again, by how we use it and engage it.
Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Stephanie Marie, and I'm on a mission to spread hope, sharing people's stories to encourage, inspire, and empower you. Today, we are talking about brain health, and I'm so excited to welcome Dr. Lori Cook, who is the Director of Clinical Research at the Center for Brain Health for over 25 years. The Center for Brain Health, part of the University of Texas at Dallas, is a nonprofit research institute redefining how people understand and address the brain's health and performance. Their team conducts leading-edge research and creates science-backed programs that empower people to be more proactive about their own brain health. I am so fascinated by this topic today. So without further ado, let's begin. Hello, everyone. Hello, Dr. Cook. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm so excited to dive into brain health. It's something I've been interested in for a long time. And when we spoke, I was just so fascinated by your background and the center. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Of course. So I'd love to start by, can you tell the audience a little bit about your journey, how you got involved with the center, some of the work you're doing there, and how that led you to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. Well, everybody's journey is so different, and mine was really interesting. If you had asked me when I was growing up what I wanted to be, I would say a zoologist, a scientist.
Really?
I was really inspired by people like Jane Goodall, Diane Fossey, people who worked out in the field with primates, was
Yes.
fascinated by that and considered pursuing that in college, but ultimately decided to pursue music and singing
Really?
instead once I was in college. But it wasn't long before I really felt the itch to engage in science in some way. And it was really just by happenstance that I discovered while I was in college the field of speech language pathology. So I was really interested as a singer in the human voice and realized this is a field where I can blend my love of music and my love of science in a way that can really help people
Yes.
and help them find their voice. And so that really brought me to the field of speech pathology. And in order to do that, you have to pursue a graduate degree, which brought me to the University of Texas at Dallas to obtain my master's in speech pathology. But I decided to pursue a work study, was assigned as a research assistant in the lab of Dr. Sandy Chapman. Also had a background as a speech language pathologist, but really had risen in her knowledge of cognitive neuroscience. And I just fell in love with the work that was being done. Early on, I was working on some longitudinal research following kids and teens after brain injury and concussion. So it was an amazing way to see how research and science can really meet people's needs in some valuable ways. So again, just really fell in love with the brain, with this work, with the hope and support that we could bring to families, and really meeting a need that wasn't being addressed in the world at large. Really found my niche here and have been here 25 years doing this work.
Wow. That's awesome, Dr. Cook. So Dr. Sandra Bond Chapman, she founded the Center for Brain Health in 1999. Is that correct?
That's right. She established the center in 99. And again, very unique. In fact, she was able to trademark at the time the word brain health brought together
Wow.
because nobody was using those two words together. Essentially, many people, when they hear that I work at the Center for Brain Health, they immediately assume, oh, brain health, you mean, is this an Alzheimer's center, or is this a center meant to support people after brain injury? And while all of the above could be true, what she was really setting out to do was to establish the center to really advance the field of brain health. In other words, helping people make the most of their brain across the life course, whether they've had a disease or a diagnosis or not. Essentially, how can we make our brains healthier? And so really was a pioneer in establishing brain health as a field, and we really continue to be a big voice in that today.
Of course. And that brings up a really interesting discussion. There's so many misconceptions about brain health. As you mentioned, most people assume that has to do with Alzheimer's studies. Also, another really big misconception is that people think brain health is simultaneous with mental health. And we can also
Right.
get into that as well, but there's really keen differences. But let's talk about some of those misconceptions. And also, I feel that brain health, the word, I've been hearing the word more recently. And I don't know if that's just my, perception of it, but I've been noticing the word being more spoken about recently or like popularized.
Yes, in fact, we've been really excited to see how brain health, this is becoming more a part of the public discourse, really a global conversation. In fact, the World Health Organization put out a definition of brain health that many people look to a couple of years ago. And essentially, they defined brain health as the continual promotion of optimal brain development, cognitive health. So, again, that's how we're using our brain to learn and think and make decisions. Our mental health, as you mentioned. And then we really have extended that definition even further to include our connectedness to other people, as well as connectedness to a sense of purpose.
Wow.
So, bottom line, brain health is meant to be looked at very holistically.
Yes.
And simply put, I like to tell people brain health essentially just making the most of your brain skills, your brain's ability to
Mm.
thrive in your life, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter where you started. We can all have better brain health. And oftentimes, Dr. Chapman will hear her say, let's make sure that next year is going to be your best brain health year yet. And we all want that, regardless of how old we are.
Wow, that definition of brain health is really interesting because I love how it's so comprehensive, as you mentioned, like holistic. It includes mental health in there. And so I love how it also includes a sense of purpose and the greater well-being. I really, really love hearing about that. And so what makes the center and its approach really unique in addressing brain health?
Well, I really do think it's just that the fact that we are approaching this very multidimensionally. And I think, another thing that's unique is we are first and foremost a research center.
Mhm.
But if you were to come visit us, you'd actually see we have a two-building campus here. And while I'm sitting in my office in the research hub, if you will,
Mhm.
carrying that work forward, we also right next door have our translation arm. In other
Mhm.
words, we don't want to have to wait 40 years to get something from research into the hands of people who could benefit. So it's all about really quickly translating from the research into practice, whether that's through services, programs, outreach, really making brain health accessible.
Mhm.
So ultimately, our goal is not only to educate, further the field, but it's also to empower and equip people with tools to support and even improve their brain health and performance.
Wow, that's amazing. So let's say someone's listening and they've never heard the word brain health. They didn't even really consider this. What are some tangible ways that anyone listening can start to foster greater brain health for themselves?
Yeah, I love this question. It's interesting. One of the things we've learned already through the data we've been collecting through the Brain Health Project is
Mhm.
that we traditionally still kind of think about our brain and all that our brain does for us in sort of these boxes, right? So,
Yes.
well, yeah, there's the things I do during my day, like my sleep and what activities I'm doing and how I manage my stress. Or we think about our cognitive skills, how I'm thinking and making decisions, my memory. Or we think about it in terms of our mental health and well being and our mood. Or we might think about it in terms of our social connections and,
Mm.
like you said, connection to purpose. Kind of those traditional categories, if you will. And that's really, even when you take the Brain Health Index assessment, you'll see a lot of the metrics track with those categories. But what we quickly learned is that as you measure how these things change over time, particularly as people are investing in these things and we're actually seeing
Mm.
gain as people are more intentional about supporting their brain, these things don't stay in their little boxes. There's a lot of interesting kind of ways that the different things we use our brain and support our brain grow
Yes.
together. So, what I mean by that, essentially, we've discovered from the data these three brain health factors.
Mhm.
And so the first one we call clarity. So think of this as like your mental clarity. A lot of it is our cognitive skills, but
Hmm.
not so surprisingly, one thing that's hugely supportive of that is sleep. Sleep is
Yes.
foundational to brain health
Yes.
and particularly our ability to have mental clarity in our day.
Mm.
But one that surprised us was our measure of compassion. It also
Mm.
seemed to be hugely supportive of clarity. And it kind of opened up some interesting research questions, right? Like, okay, how
Mm.
does our ability to take other people's perspectives or show empathy, how is that supporting my own
Mm.
cognitive skills or mental clarity? So that's an interesting pathway that many people haven't considered. Another of these brain health factors is what we call emotional balance. That one's pretty straightforward. It's mostly considering our mood. Do we have symptoms of high stress, low mood, anxiety? Not surprisingly, again, sleep plays a huge role in our emotional balance and change in that over time as well. So, again, foundational. And then the last of our brain health factors right now, as we're measuring these things, is connectedness. So, as I mentioned, we're starting to see how important this is to overall brain health. And again, it doesn't just represent, how connected are you in terms of social activities and time with others. A lot of it is also about your connectedness to a sense of meaning and purpose in your day to day life, especially at those life transitions, right? I work a lot with people who maybe are at retirement age, transitioning out of the workforce,
Mhm.
or maybe you're at the other end, you're transitioning out of school
Yes.
into career or into becoming a parent. Sometimes it can be hard to nurture that sense of purpose, but we really see how important that is for supporting overall brain health. So when I kind of like to give people tangible tools, I like
Mhm.
to think about at least one tool for each one of these three
Yes.
factors. So for clarity,
Mhm.
one of the most valuable things you can do for your do is really try to limit how much you are asking your brain to multitask. It's become, especially in the age of technology and information overload, right, constantly bombarding us. It's amazing what a drain that is to our brain's battery. And really at a neural level, you're not multitasking, you're really just toggling back and forth
Mm.
between these tasks. And there's an energy cost every time you have to make that switch. So one of the things I encourage people to do, we call this in our strategies the brain power of one,
Mm.
is really being intentional to build in more times for single tasking. So being able to really give your focus to what you're doing. It could be something as simple as, when you're having dinner with a friend, your
Yes.
phone on airplane mode, right? So cutting out
Mm.
that other text conversation that's going.
I like that.
Or it could be, if you're in a workplace context, turning off your email and silencing your phone when you're
Mm.
putting all your brain power into a difficult writing or
Mm.
crafting a tricky email. So essentially, we kind of have to engineer out those
Mm.
distractions that might be competing for attention when we really want to give that good focus. So that's one for clarity.
Mhm.
But as a little bonus there, it's equally important to have some times when you're not pushing your brain to do anything.
Mm.
So we call this taking a brain break
Mm.
and having some, even if it's just little 3 to 5 minute times in your day periodically where you kind of disconnect. To use the analogy of a battery or a cell phone again,
Yes.
uh, you may know the tip if you ever need to recharge your phone. If you put it in airplane mode, when you charge it, it charges like 3 times
Oh,
faster,
really? I didn't realize that.
right? So, kind of the same concept for the brain. If you only have a few minutes to grab a
Mm.
recharge, put your brain on airplane mode. So don't try to upload
Mm.
or download any information. Don't jump straight on and check your socials or, it's maybe
Yeah.
it's taking a step outside and taking a few deep breaths in the sunshine.
Mm.
Maybe it's going to the restroom without your phone. Whatever it takes to just have a few minutes to disconnect
Yeah.
from technology, from people, and really just let your brain rest.
Yeah. Because I think people use their break and they just, even I'm guilty of this. When I'm on a break, I'm just checking my phone. It's just natural, you know? We just
Yes,
do that so like without even thinking. We're just like, turn to the phone. So I think I
it's
like
true.
that, like taking a few minutes, like don't use your break for that, or try at least not to at least some point in the day. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's hard at first to do that because you're right. I think of even when I was in line at the grocery store recently,
Hmm.
the minute I'm just standing there, I pull out my phone. Well, you can
Hmm.
just take a minute and just, again, let your brain rest. And in the brain, neurally speaking, there's some beautiful things that happen when we truly kind of get that disconnect. There's a network in the brain called a default mode network. And this
Hmm.
is a network that really doesn't come online until we're not trying to push our brain
Hmm.
to do something really effortful. And yet it's an opportunity for us to do a little self-reflection, or it's an opportunity for your brain to kind of connect the dots. If you've
Hmm.
ever experienced one of those kind of aha moments,
Yeah.
right, where suddenly a solution pops in your brain, more often than not, what are we doing when those kinds of things happen? Nothing in particular, maybe taking a shower, for example.
That's so true. So I guess the shower thoughts is a real thing.
It's a real thing. It's one of the only times we kind of disconnect, right? Shower's a routine. We don't have to think about
Hmm.
that. So, yeah, your default mode in the brain can kick into action, and it's kind of processing the experiences you've had and connecting some dots. It's
Hmm.
also a wonderful way to help kind of spur creativity and, yeah, innovation. So, we need this. We need more of this. And I think as technology becomes ever present, we're getting less and less of that,
Hmm.
which can impact our
Hmm.
mental clarity in a lot of ways. That is something we can all do for our clarity. Even if it's just intentionally taking 1 5-minute brain break today, a
Hmm.
little goes a long way. Another one for emotional balance, one of my favorite simple tools is my breath.
Hmm.
Admittedly, I love this too as a singer. Breath is a really powerful tool to help us regulate our nervous system in a lot of ways. And one could dig into a lot of the science around this, but
Hmm.
one of my favorites is the practice called the 4-6
Oh,
method. And you may have heard of this. Basically, what it is you simply inhale to a count of 4, and then you'll exhale to a count of 6. So you see how that exhale is a little bit longer than the
yes.
inhale. And what that's doing, it's doing a few things. Typically you'll do at least a few cycles of that.
Hmm.
But physiologically, one of the areas in your brain that's very kind of tightly intertwined with our breath is a little structure called the locus coeruleus. And it's located in
Hmm.
the brainstem. So again, in that area of the brain that controls a lot of these basic processes like our breath, our heart rate.
Wow.
And when you do this kind of longer exhale than
Hmm.
inhale, so the 4-6 is a good example, it can actually mediate a particular neurotransmitter that's released by this locus coeruleus called norepinephrine.
Hmm.
And so it's a way to help kind of bring it into balance, help you achieve kind of that sweet spot of focus and calm. And what I love about this kind of tool is everybody can do it and everybody has access to it anywhere they go. So, whether you're sitting in bumper to bumper traffic and
Hmm.
need to be both calm and focused, you could do this. Maybe you're going into a job interview, you could do this. So, I definitely encourage people to think about their breath. Sometimes even just telling our body, giving our body that signal to slow down our breath. We're more likely to breathe more deeply, which again can kind of calm that whole nervous system. When we breathe fast and shallow all the time, it
Hmm.
tends to keep our limbic system, our amygdala in particular, hyperactivated, which is going to lend to those feelings
Yeah.
of reactivity. So,
Hmm.
another simple tool to help us maintain that emotional balance.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I always wondered like why people said, even with meditation too, why people always said the longer out breath. So the norepinephrine is a stress hormone, right? So it lowers that stress hormone.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah, it
Yeah.
plays a role in stress and focus. It's also a method, that longer exhale, it's also stimulating your vagus nerve, which, if you've
Oh.
ever learned about the parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest system,
Hmm.
which is opposite of the sympathetic nervous system, which is that fight or flight. So, this is a way to activate that rest and digest
Yeah,
system that's
that's
so
incredible.
important.
And the vagus nerve, that's the longest nerve in the body that goes from the brain. I think it goes all the way down to the belly. And so
That's
I think,
right.
when people say like, oh, those I don't know if that is related to science, but gut feelings, or when you feel stressed, you have that like the tenseness in your stomach, like that knot in your stomach. I think isn't that related to why people feel that somewhat?
Yeah, I think it's all part of it. In fact, there's
Yeah.
a lot of science nowadays helping us better understand the gut-brain
Mm-hmm.
connection, if you've heard of that. I think it's something that people have realized for probably centuries, but we didn't recognize the science behind that
Mm.
connection is so important, which is another reason why you're even seeing some neuroscientists who are studying the microbiome, the gut,
Mm.
and thinking about links with even mental health and again, really how to support brain health as a whole
Yeah.
through all these practices.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I just love hearing about all of this. This is amazing. And again, these are simple things people can do, like anywhere. And so our last one is the compassion.
Mm. Yes, thank you. So that last connectedness factor,
Mm-hmm.
one of my favorite tools here is another one of those. So like with brain breaks, I like
Mm-hmm.
to kind of aim for, I call it the 5 by 5, trying to get in 5 5-minute brain breaks by 5 o'clock. So I kind of
Mm-hmm.
treat it like, like the 10,000 steps goal. I don't
Yes,
hit it
yes.
every day, but it's a way to help me tick that off. Well, this is another one of those. I try to aim for this formula of compassion times 7.
Mm-hmm.
So think of the number 7. Let's break that down into every day, really trying to be intentional about recognizing an opportunity to show someone else compassion,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's through a simple, kind act, a simple, kind word. Firstly, to two people that are close to you,
Mm-hmm.
friends, close, family members, also two people who maybe are not as close to you. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
ideally, two people that maybe you have a little friction with or don't
Mm-hmm.
always relate or see eye to eye with. So there's two people you're close to, two people you're not,
Mm-hmm.
and then two people who are maybe complete strangers or people
Mm-hmm.
that often go overlooked or unappreciated.
Wow.
So, yeah, think about uh, who is doing security at the front of the building that you're visiting that day,
Mm-hmm.
for example. Again, providing a kind word, opening the door for them. And then my favorite, so we have 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1, and that would be at least one act of self compassion. So make
Mm-hmm.
sure there's something every day you can do that really takes that self compassion. So again, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
a positive affirmation, taking a moment for self care, whatever that may look like. So,
Mm-hmm.
kind of aiming for that 7 every day that's spread across all the people that you engage with in your sphere.
Wow, I've never heard of that. The rule of thumb. I've never heard of that rule of thumb. And I'm just fascinated by the research that with compassion, empathy, and how it affects the brain. So what
Mm.
really have you seen as we're showing compassion, or how does that help the brain, so to speak? Because I find this fascinating.
Yeah, well, this is definitely an ever growing
Hmm.
focus of study because just as you said, what we're learning, and this kind of comes back to a fundamental aspect of the brain,
Hmm.
we're learning so much about neuroplasticity. And
Wow. Yes.
neuroplasticity, what that means is really that the it's the brain's lifelong ability to change, adapt, reorganize itself, even improve.
Hmm.
And, just like the body can be strengthened and improved through
Hmm.
physical fitness, we're learning just how true that is for the brain as well. And what drives neuroplasticity? Well, it's
Hmm.
about how you're using and engaging your brain every day. And so I often tell people, in fact, that you can add this to your resume today. You are a neuroengineer. Every one of us.
Wow.
We're engineering our own brain, again, by how we use it and engage it. And
Yes.
so, as we explore more of these kind of positive
Hmm.
practices, it's really, really remarkable how we are, continuing to fire up those pathways, right, that are activated when you do that and
Hmm.
building, strengthening that. If you think of your brain like a muscle, right, you're gonna strengthen what you practice. So yeah, I think there's a lot of new knowledge that shows us. Many people will say, well, I'm just not very empathetic, or I'm just not
Hmm.
passionate. And people didn't realize this is a trainable skill. People can
Hmm.
grow these abilities. And that's what I think we're seeing evidence of that's really encouraging to me.
Yeah.
Neuroplasticity, what that means is personal agency, self-agency. We're helping drive those changes. Even I love the title of your podcast, Hope. That emphasis
Thank
on
you.
hope. Hope really takes self-agency, right? Because you're not only kind of envisioning those positive outcomes, but you're also kind of striving towards goals, pathways to help you
Mm,
get there. And that activates areas in the brain that are really powerful, like our prefrontal cortex, again, kind of our future thinking
mm,
abilities. It also ties into areas that are really crucial to decision making and
mhm,
perseverance, things like our anterior cingulate cortex, which can also help support resilience to things like stress. So yeah, when I think of some of the work around compassion as well as
mm,
hope and these positive mindsets and practices, they really can be powerful tools to help you engineer a more resilient brain
mm.
and a brain that's really going to be able to grow on these skills as well.
Wow, I've never heard the word neuroengineering before we spoke. And I just think that that's amazing. And I think it really puts it into context. Like all of these tools that you have listed, all of these resources and tangible action steps, if someone had never done these before and if you start doing them, I think the hope of it is that there's hope in that you can strengthen your brain's connections. And when people say it'll be easier over time, that's kind of where it comes from, like that neuroplasticity, like your brain, those connections become stronger with what you're doing. So start with the sleep, the emotional balance, the compassion. I think this is amazing steps that people can take. And I love how you talked about the hope part. Thank you for saying that about the podcast name. I love that. And the hope really in our brain health is that neuroengineering, that neuroplasticity, the fact that we can take actionable steps right now, whatever point you're at, to better our brain health and overall health. So I think that this is amazing. Dr. Cook, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, this is, in fact, we had a wonderful partnership with some other groups in our community that are all about
Mm,
bringing brain health to the community, in particular, kind of different mental health tools as well as
mhm.
thinking tools, and wanted to build a program out of the YMCA for youth. And we all banded together
Yes,
and said, what are we going to call this? We're going to call this Yes, You Can,
I love
because I think
that. I
that's
love
really the
that.
core of
Yes.
brain health and leveraging neuroplasticity
Mm,
to promote well being, to promote more effective brain performance. It's
mm,
about taking that agency, having that proactive mindset, and knowing that there are some wonderful tools to help support you
mm.
to do that.
Yeah, I something that I just thought of this right now is especially I feel college students,
Mm,
are very vulnerable towards those toxic brain habits, so to speak, because they're on technology a lot, they're on social media all the time, extra caffeine to power through, late nights, they're not getting good sleep, maybe
yeah,
they're not getting the exercise that they once did when they were children in sports more. So I feel
yeah.
that college students in particular are very vulnerable, and I'm sure there's many vulnerable populations that now I'm thinking of, like, wow, college students must be so vulnerable to these toxic brain habits. And it's interesting because your center is on a college campus. And I wonder if you kind of see as well where college students are more vulnerable in this aspect.
Well, thank you for noticing that. Yeah, we are part of the University of Texas at Dallas. And it's interesting because when it comes to brain health, we've had a
Mhm.
harder time engaging young people. Because again, so many
Mm.
people, when you hear brain health, you
Yes.
assume that's about disease or disorder or decline,
Yes.
like we're preventing Alzheimer's. And generally, the younger you are, the less you're thinking about that, right? And
That's true.
so what we've really worked hard to do is to help college students recognize, no, brain health is for everybody, again, regardless of who you are, where you've started. And I do think that COVID and the pandemic has really opened up the conversation, taken off
Mm.
some of the stigma around talking
Really?
about, certainly about talking about mental health, but I think even
Hmm.
bigger than that, brain health. And one thing that I think a lot of students are looking for is that connectedness piece. I think there's been talk of kind of a loneliness epidemic or students becoming more
Yes.
isolated because of the way we take classes or do so much of our work. So I think one of the things that's really been so beneficial is helping students recognize the value of connectedness and
Mm-hmm.
supporting not just their brain health, but also their performance,
Mm-hmm.
as helping them become even more effective in their studies. So we love opportunities to help students see the value, but also recognizing there's not just one path, right? Every
Mm-hmm.
single one of us is different. Every single one of our brains is different. So it's great to think about brain health multidimensionally because then you can see
Yes.
lots of different pathways to support your brain health. So maybe it's through connectedness and compassion and leveraging those strengths. So sleep is an opportunity area.
Mm-hmm.
So prioritizing sleep to help support your brain health. One student I had the pleasure of coaching with
Mm-hmm.
early on in our brain health project, he was looking for a simple habit to build to hopefully be impactful in his brain health. What he chose to do was charge his cell phone outside of his bedroom at night.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. Just that practice. Had a central charging station. When I circled back with him a few months later, he said, "Oh my gosh, just that one thing was so transformative." So not only was I getting more sleep because I didn't have my
Mm-hmm.
phone in bed, just doom scrolling at night. So I was
Yes.
getting to sleep earlier, but he also really noticed the impact on his mental health, his mood,
Mm.
his well being. And that one practice then allowed him to explore other, again, sometimes it's just simple steps that can make a really big difference in supporting your brain health. So a lot of it is
Mm.
about kind of exploring, getting insights about, yeah, what are some of those possibilities for you in your context?
That's incredible, Dr. Cook. And yeah, I think these tools are for anyone, but I would say especially college students, you want to start thinking about this because again, I know that so many students are not thinking about their brain health. Like you said, there's so many misconceptions and it's just something we think, oh, we'll consider when we're older. And for myself, I'm going to start focusing on it more. And I would say for people that are, in college, especially when you're multitasking a lot and
Yeah,
you're really on the go. I think, I would really say to start making those little steps you said. They really add up to make a big difference. So I just love everything you've mentioned, Dr. Cook. Thank you so much.
so many people have recognized this as so
Mm-hmm.
important. One of the things we're actually doing right now, we've just launched a Brain Healthy Campus initiative.
Mm,
So the goal
really?
is to really make brain health accessible on campuses,
Yes.
not just for students, but also for the staff, the faculty, that whole campus community.
Mm.
What are ways that we can again make our campuses and in turn all the people who make up our campuses brain healthier. Another thing I love to share a wonderful insight from a student that we worked with that said, well, you know what? I learned that I can think about my brain kind of like I think about my skin. Many of us wear sunscreen every day, not only to help protect our skin today, but
Mm-hmm.
also to help set the stage for healthier skin down the line. And so it's that same concept. What are some simple steps you can take today to support your brain health for now and the future? So you can think of it
Mm.
like your skincare routine, your brain health care routine.
Oh, I love that. That's amazing. That's awesome, Dr. Cook. And I know we did talk about hope with the neuroengineering. I thought that was amazing. I'd like to ask you, what role has hope played in your journey? I mean, you've done some really
Mm.
amazing work at the center and also in your studies and your career. So what role has hope played in your journey? I'd love to ask you. And how do you hold
Yeah,
on to it today?
yeah, I mean, hope is so vital to the human condition. And I think this realization really hit me early on in my work here when I was involved in our research studies with families who'd been impacted by brain injury, right?
Hmm.
Especially having a child with brain injury. Um, these families had been burdened with so much bad news, right? Gloom and doom, and
Yes.
seeing this shift, feeling essentially as though they'd lost the child that they had because they were having to, really had a new path in front of them. And I so appreciate that through this work and as we were learning more about neuroplasticity and healing and recovery and seeing there's not an expiration date on your brain's ability to make gains. So working with kids years and years down the road, we were finally able to really bring hope to the equation And just to see how that drove recovery even further as people really were motivated and took action. That is a really powerful tool. And again, as we're understanding better how it even can help change our brain in
Yes.
some powerful ways, that has always stuck with me. So I see that as so vital to any conversation around brain health, and resilience building. So something I've continued to see in action, and I hope
Mhm.
that we can continue to bring to people.
Wow, that's amazing about resilience and about how much this work has impacted people, families, parents, anyone listening. And people listening who are at home and are not located in the Texas area, they can actually get involved on the website. You have a few resources for the center that people can engage with. So one of them being the Toxic Brain Habits quiz, and so also the Brain Health Project. Can you talk to us a little bit about those?
Yeah, let me start with the BrainHealth Project. This, in fact, anybody can check it out. We have a website. It's the BrainHealth Project, so all spelled out,
Mhm.
.org, O-R-G. And what this is, it is a research study. Believe it or not, we were already planning to launch this online research study in March of 2020, right when the whole world
Really?
essentially had to stop and looking for online resources with the onset of
Wow.
the pandemic. But we really set out for this to be a longitudinal study, at least 10 years, that is open to really any generally healthy adult, ages 18 and up. But we are seeking to not only more formally define brain health through this large online research, but also to have the capacity to better measure it, give people insights about their individual brain health, as well as give people access to tools and help us better understand what supports and
Mm.
enhances brain health. So essentially, people have access to take a multidimensional brain health index assessment, get some insight and even some feedback and coaching about that for themselves, take it online as frequently as every 6 months, as long as they want to participate. And then in the interim, have access to different online tools. So whether it's through cognitive strategies, so kind of taking these little micro learning modules to think about how you think and how you can engage your brain in a brain healthy way over the course of your day. We also tap into tools and trainings around lifestyle behaviors that are going to support brain health, how to better your sleep, for example, or resilience to stress. So it's really a wonderful tool, one, to help us better learn about brain health, but two, to really engage people in investing in their own brain health. So we hope over the course of the 10 plus years to enroll upwards of 100,000 people. And we are already well
Wow.
along our way, about 5 years in, and nearing 30,000 people engaged already.
Wow, that's incredible. And tell us about the Toxic Brain Habits quiz.
Yeah, so this is just a tool. This is not research or data that's going
Mhm.
anywhere. This is just, think of it like a little self quiz that I encourage people to check out, if anything, just to start to glean insights about how you go through the course of your day and how you're treating your brain as you do it. So if you go to our main Center for Brain Health website, it's just Center for Brain Health, all spelled out, .org. You'll see up at the top of the website a link to test yourself. It says, are your daily habits toxic to your brain health? And I know it
Wow.
sounds scary, but I promise it's not. Just 8 questions. You can quickly run through them.
Mhm.
Again, you're not having to enter any personal information. It just gives you some quick feedback. But it's done through the lens of how charged is your brain's battery every
Mhm.
day, especially at the
Mhm.
end of the day. So the feedback you'll get is through that lens. Okay, based on your responses, you must be fully charged, or based
Mhm.
on your responses, you're probably operating at low power. And I know a lot of us
Mhm.
probably feel that way. So I encourage
Yeah.
folks to check it out because I think it'll start to give you some insight into what are some habits that
Mhm.
maybe I could take a different approach to, whether we're talking about things like multitasking or
Mhm.
not giving your brain any downtime, just jumping from task to task. These are the sorts of things. So encourage folks to check that out and start to get a sense for how you can treat your brain even better.
I really like that analogy about wanting to keep your brain fully charged. I really like that. I think that this is such an important message. Thank you so much, Dr. Cook. I learned so much, and I know anyone listening is going to as well. And of course, I'm going to link all the amazing resources that the center has. Thank you so much, Dr. Cook. This is amazing.
Likewise, it was so great sharing with you today.
Wow, I truly found this so interesting. I've studied psychology, so I really love learning about the brain, but to hear about these actionable steps that anyone can take in their life at any point, I found this fascinating. So if this message has resonated with you, please be sure to like, share, subscribe for weekly updates, click the little bell icon, leave a comment down below letting me know what action step you're going to start taking in your brain health routine. Thank you for listening and have a fabulous day. Bye.